Let's start with the scary and move toward the things that make space feel cursed. Number 10. In the desert, giant dishes listen to the sky, and sometimes it answers with something too intense. These are fast radio bursts, absurdly powerful flashes from space with no clear sender. The monitors look calm, then one spike hits so hard it feels like space slapped the room awake. They're creepy because they hit hard, vanish fast, and leave scientists chasing a cosmic jump scare. We can trace some back to distant skies, but that only changes the mystery from where to why. Imagine hearing a metallic chirp from space after it crossed an impossible distance to reach us. Some of these signals travel billions of light years, which is a dramatic way to send confusion. It feels like something invisible screamed across a galaxy and never showed its face. That is the creepy part. The power is impressive, but the missing explanation stays with you. Sometimes the pattern almost looks deliberate, which is the last thing anyone wants to hear. Scientists have theories, but sometimes a theory is just a smart guess trying to stay calm. Maybe it's a magnetar, maybe something stranger, or maybe an alien machine cleared its throat. If space sent Earth a warning, at least one guy would still ignore it and keep gaming. The real problem is we still can't tell if the sender was dying, colliding, spinning, or signaling. Even when the array goes quiet, one dish keeps moving, and the silence feels worse. The data looks a little too clean and sharp, and that makes everyone in the room sit up straighter. Random noise is fine, but a precise signal from nowhere feels like space knocked once and left. Then the bursts stack up until the control room looks less like science and more like a warning. After all that panic and static, space goes silent again like nothing happened at all. One unexplained call from the dark is scarier than 1,000 ordinary sounds we understand. At that point, ripping off your headphones feels reasonable, because maybe the sky answered back. The red light blinks once, the dish freezes, and the night suddenly feels too aware of you. That was number 10, and somehow the list is only getting worse from here. Number 9. Rogue planets drift through space alone, frozen and homeless, like leftovers nobody came back for. These worlds get thrown out of their systems and left to wander with no sunrise and no destination. Sometimes, one bad gravitational shove is enough to evict a planet from the only home it had. No sun, no warm sky, no seasons, just endless night and the worst weather forecast in space. Once the orbit breaks, the planet belongs nowhere and just keeps moving because gravity said so. Stand there with a flashlight and it would feel less useful than symbolic. Night sounds cozy until you realize this kind of night can last for millions of years. Beneath all that ice, there could still be hidden oceans, which makes the whole thing worse. A rogue planet feels haunted because it is a whole world cut off from home and never came back. Picture a horizon that never changes color because dawn is not late, it's gone. Some of these worlds may keep heat trapped inside, which means darkness may not mean lifelessness. So yes, there could be chemistry, storms, maybe even life, all happening on a planet with no star. Forever winter is bad enough, but forever winter with possibilities under the ice is much worse. Because the second you ask what could survive there, the darkness stops feeling empty. It just keeps drifting, one faint world in a universe that barely notices it exists. We only spot some of them through faint heat, like catching the glow of a trespasser moving through. Rogue planets are terrifying because they prove even entire worlds can thrown out and forgotten. Fall into one of those lightless trenches and your flashlight becomes a small, emotional gesture. Then all that remains are footprints ending at a darkness that never answers. It is unsettling to realize that planets, like people, can lose their place. Watching one tiny blue world roll away from the light feels strangely personal. Shine a beam into that abyss, and it only tells you how little of it you can see. Then the planet slips back into shadow, still moving, still alone, still not ours to follow. That was number 9. And now we move to something smaller and much more absurd. Number 8. At first glance, it looks like a tiny glowing marble, which is misleading behavior for something. This is a neutron star, the crushed core of a dead star packed so tightly. A giant star collapses inward, and what remains is this tiny blue-white object with an attitude. We are talking about something roughly city-sized that can still hold more mass than the Sunday. If you tried to compare a spoonful of neutron star matter to a mountain, this is usually the part where the scientist lowers the coffee and starts rechecking the numbers. The horror here is simple. Something unbelievably small can carry an unreasonable amount of matter. Try landing near one and gravity would win that argument before your feet even touch the ground. Neutron stars feel wrong because gravity crushes matter into a form our brains can't picture. Put Earth next to one, and the scale looks silly right up until the mass labels show up. Under that pressure, atoms surrender and matter becomes something closer to a physics dare. Then you add violent magnetic fields, and the whole thing starts looking like a compact machine. Even the strongest idiot alive would see a pebble of neutron star matter and back away immediately. The surface is not even easy to describe, because these objects live right on the edge of It pulses in the dark, calm and compact, like space hit a catastrophe inside a bead of light. Cutaway diagrams help a little, but only in the same way maps help when the destination is. Neutron stars are terrifying because space can take something huge and crush it into disaster. Even a loose tool drifting nearby would stop acting like a tool and start acting like a victim. Then the star remains exactly where it was, small, bright, and absurdly confident. More than anything, it compresses our faith that reality should stay intuitive. A spoon should not feel like a threat, and yet here we are. Looking at one from a distance still feels unsafe, like the tiny light weighs more than the sky. It flashes once, and the frame cuts away before your brain fully accepts what it just saw. That was number 8, and now the list gets faster, stranger, and less friendly. Number 7. A narrow beam sweeps through the dark so precisely that it feels less like astronomy than targeting. These are pulsars, spinning neutron stars that fire regular beams into space, like space built its. The star rotates, the beam sweeps, and suddenly the darkness has rhythm. What unsettles people is not just the power, but the timing. Put a lighthouse next to it and the comparison works too well for comfort. The more perfectly the pulses line up, the less everyone in the room likes what they're hearing. There is something creepy about a dead star behaving with machine-like discipline. If one of those beams swept across a planet, that would be a bad day for the planet. Pulsars feel personal because every few seconds it looks like the thing is aiming back at you. Some spin so fast that the whole star starts looking like a blur with a bad attitude. Yes, those numbers are impressive, but they get much less fun when you imagine standing anywhere. On the monitor, the spikes march across in perfect rhythm like a heartbeat from something too large. Even an ordinary lighthouse stops feeling friendly once your brain replaces the beam with radiation. Our brains don't love patterns that are too perfect, because perfect timing always sounds. Then the beams keep sweeping through empty space, patient and exact, like they have all the time. Old charts, new charts, fresh measurements, and the timing still barely changes. Pulsars are terrifying because they make dead stars behave like precise machines nobody built. See that line cross the horizon once, and you're hitting the ground before your brain finishes the... After the sweep passes, the rocks still glow like the sky just dragged a blade over them. Perfect timing becomes sinister when it comes from something. Once the clock starts matching the beam, the joke stops being funny. Count the flashes if you want, but you won't enjoy being correct. One last sweep crosses the frame like a searchlight looking for something it lost. That was number 7, and now we move on to something we can't even see properly. Number 6. You look at the galaxy, then the empty halo around it, and the math insists most of the mass is. This is dark matter, the invisible ingredient we keep having to include. Stars at the edges of galaxies spin too fast, and by all rights, some of them should have flown off. Add up the visible matter and there's still not enough gravity. So we draw a huge unseen halo around the galaxy and say the missing weight must live out there. This is where the graph stops agreeing with expectations and everyone starts saying missing mass. The creepy part is that a huge fraction of reality may be made of something we still can't directly. Entire galaxies move as if invisible hands are tugging on them from outside the visible frame. Dark matter is unsettling because most of reality may be made from ingredients we can't touch. Even light bends around it, which is impressive for something. We have candidates, theories, and particle ideas, but catching the actual thing keeps proving. So the detectors sit there in the dark waiting for a hit that never quite becomes a clean answer. At a certain point, it starts feeling like space has an invisible roommate we're all pretending not. It's a little embarrassing that we infer so much from behavior while the suspect never appears. Sometimes the only sign is light curving around an emptiness that should not be so heavy. A single blip appears on the screen, everybody leans in, and then space takes it back. Dark matter is terrifying because it might be the hidden majority. Galaxies cling to a structure we barely understand, like lights wired to an invisible skeleton. Take away the glowing stars and you're left imagining the shape of something much larger. A universe full of unseen mass is frightening because we may already be surrounded by it. The pie chart is bad enough, but the giant unlabeled slice is what ruins your day. Once you start looking up at the empty spaces between galaxies, when a bright arc bends around nothing visible, the nothing starts looking suspicious. That was number 6, and next we get to a black hole that learned how to be loud. Number 5. From a distance, it looks like a beacon, but up close, it's destruction putting on a light show. These are quasars, blazing galactic cores powered by matter falling towards supermassive black holes. Gas spirals inward, heats up, and suddenly a black hole is hosting one of the brightest shows. Some quasars shine so intensely that the rest of their own galaxy becomes background decoration. Zoom in on the center long enough and the whole galaxy starts to feel like set dressing. The spectrum looks clean, the distance looks ridiculous, and nobody likes either number. Many of these objects are so far away that when we see them, then the jets come out and now the black hole is not just feeding, it's showing off. Quasars are scary because they are bright things powered by matter losing to gravity. Put Earth next to that core and Earth stops looking like a participant in the conversation. A quasar is when a supermassive black hole decides to eat in the loudest possible way. The closer the material gets, and the uglier the future becomes. Bigger sunglasses are not going to solve this one, but the effort is cute. We understand the engine well enough, but the scale of the violence still feels unreasonable on a... From far away, the galaxy is barely visible, while the center burns like it has something to prove. Then someone circles a tiny dot on a deep field image and calmly informs you. Quasars are terrifying because they prove space can build engines so bright they light up history. Imagine that beam crossing your sky, and suddenly the heavens stop feeling poetic. After the glare fades, the silence somehow feels burned too. It is unsettling that some of the brightest things in existence are powered by torn matter. Replace a light bulb with a quasar and congratulations, the whole metaphor has become hostile. Under one of those beams, even the horizon feels like it should duck. Then the core flares so bright, the rest of the frame almost gives up. That was number 5, and from here on out, the list gets less object and more reality problem. Number 4. Look at the warped stars long enough and it starts feeling like the sky has gone soft. Heavy objects don't just tug on things, they bend space and time themselves. The bowling ball analogy helps, but only up until you remember that the sheet is reality. That is the creepy part, because gravity is not just a force, but the stage itself bending. Even light, which is supposed to go straight, starts curving when enough mass is nearby. Put two clocks in different gravity fields and they suddenly stop agreeing on what time it is. Gravity can change not only where you go, but how fast time moves while you're there. Walk far enough through a warped place, and the hallway starts feeling like it was designed by a... Space is less comforting once you realize it's not a rigid stage, but something flexible. Those smeared crescents of light are galaxies being optically bullied by mass. The only reason we stay calm about this is that the local version is gentle enough not to make a... GPS works because relativity gets corrected for, which is cool and slightly horrible. The curved floor joke stops being funny once the floor is reality itself. Our brains were built for flat rooms, straight roads, and clocks that agree, not for space. Distorted starlight drifting around invisible mass looks beautiful in the same way a whirlpool. Follow the arcs carefully enough, and you can trace the presence of something heavy hiding in plain. Gravitational warping is terrifying because it reveals that distance. Even a beam trying to travel straight can end up taking the scenic route against its will. Then the clock hands disagree again, and suddenly time feels more like an opinion. The universe turns out to be less like a room and more like a fabric. Start with a clean grid, add a heavy mass, and watch certainty bend inward. If the horizon itself starts curving wrong, panic becomes a reasonable response. A ring of light around empty darkness is an efficient way to ruin trust in straight lines. That was number 4, and now we get to the horror of too much nothing. Number 3. Stand at the edge of a supervoid and it looks less like a region of space. Supervoids are enormous regions with far fewer galaxies than expected. On the map, the empty patch already looks bad before you even read the distance labels. This is not ordinary emptiness, but emptiness stretched to a scale that starts feeling theatrical. Fill one panel with galaxies and leave the other mostly blank. Float in the middle of one and almost e-direction starts looking like a bad idea. Some of these voids are hundreds of millions of light years across. A lone galaxy inside that darkness feels like the last street lamp in a dead city. Emptiness gets terrifying when it's so vast that even galaxies feel heartbreakingly far apart. The more the camera zooms out, the more human scale gets erased from the conversation. The universe forms a giant web of structure, and that only makes the giant dark gaps between the... Keep looking ahead, and eventually the stars stop thinning out and start disappearing. Infinite privacy sounds great until it's large enough to crush perspective. A place this empty doesn't feel like travel anymore. It feels like exile. Against the glowing web, the void looks like a bite taken out of existence. The more carefully astronomers draw the boundary, the larger the dark region seems to become. Supervoids are terrifying because they turn space into a desert so huge. Send a signal into that blackness, and it feels like throwing your voice into a canyon. Then no answer comes back, not because nobody heard you, but because almost nothing is there. A monster is scary, sure, but a place so empty that help and meaning both feel distant may be worse. The star map starts losing dots faster than your hand can redraw them. Sit there in the black long enough, and even the nearest visible structure starts feeling. The frame holds on the emptiness for one extra beat, and that beat does a lot of damage. That was number 3, and now we move to the one everybody was expecting. Number 2. Hover near a black hole long enough and the darkness starts feeling less like an absence. The event horizon is the boundary around a black hole beyond which nothing gets back out. Around the black center, hot gas glows beautifully, which is generous of it considering what sits. Once something crosses that line, escape stops being difficult and becomes impossible. Draw all the arrows you want, they still curve back inward and disappear. The closer you drift, the more the stars around the hole stop behaving like stars. What makes the event horizon extra terrifying is that it's not a wall you slam into. Even light gets pulled sideways around it, which is a strong sign you should not get involved. From far away, an object seems to freeze near the edge, as if time itself got nervous. Small black hole, giant black hole, same basic rule. Cross the line and you belong to the dark now. The honest answer to what happens after that still, we don't know. If the gravity difference is strong enough, you don't fall in so much as get turned into a long... The fact that scientists use the word spaghettification makes this both worse and ruder. So people imagine wormholes, alternate universes, and stranger possibilities. The glowing ring is beautiful, but it is beauty arranged around a hole with no answers. We finally imaged one, and the photo only made it feel more real and more upsetting. The event horizon is terrifying because it's not merely a death zone but a point of no return. Send one last signal outward and it stretches, reddens, weakens, and never quite makes it home. Then only the ring remains, calmly circling as if nothing important just vanished. Some places are frightening not just because they kill you, but because nothing comes back. Open that door even, and e-survival instinct you own should file a formal complaint. At the edge, even the dust seems to know which way the story ends. One final spark falls inward, turns red, and disappears like a thought being deleted. That was number 2, and the last one is bigger than any object on the list. Number 1. The final realization is that the scariest thing in space may not be an object at all. Answer, we find, seems to explain one layer while revealing another layer underneath it. Start in your room, pull back to your planet, and it already begins to feel like you're losing your... Then you stack systems inside structures, and human scale disappears fast. Each rung of the zoom-out ladder makes the last one look embarrassingly small. A hamster is cute and harmless right up until context changes. Scale is a monster maker, and suddenly the harmless thing becomes a giant red-eyed nightmare. Now wrap the observable universe in a bubble and admit that even this bubble may not be the whole. That is the worst part, because the edge of what we can see is not necessarily the edge of what. Zoom farther out and galaxies become clusters. Clusters become threads. This is why simulation ideas keep coming back, because once reality gets big, a row of sleeping minds in pods sounds silly until you realize it only has to work once. No, reality doesn't have to become flat Earth nonsense to stay deeply unsettling. Higher dimensions, hidden structures, unknown fields, all of it points to the same rude conclusion. By this point, Earth is no longer small, it's practically a punctuation mark. Fill the board with equations and sooner or later the final line still ends in a question mark. The most terrifying thing may be not a monster or an explosion. Beyond the visible bubble, there may be more structure, more layers, or more of whatever this hole. And somewhere beyond our horizon sits a final question we may never be able to walk up to and ask. Imagination races ahead of evidence, and all of them feel expensive. In the end, we're left looking up at one giant question mark and pretending that counts as closure. Zoom in on the panic if you want, because that expression is the human response to cosmic scale. Thanks for watching, and I hope this made space feel exactly less friendly. Maybe the darkest part of space is not out there at all, but in how little we understand.